Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Grieco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. I am joined, as always, by Billy. PAX makes me feel good, Rothert.
PAX does make me feel good, Gino. Mainly because it's one of my only vacations out of the year, and it's everything you want. It's basically Disney World for nerds that are into games. And what more can a young man want than going to a convention center with 10,000 other, sweaty, sexually frustrated people?
Clearly nothing. Clearly nothing else. And so, if you have not guessed, listeners, we are talking about PAX East 2017 today. Both of us went. We had a good time. We saw some games, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff we saw and experienced. But before that, reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have comment sections. People are using them now, and let me tell you, it's startling. I didn't expect it. I didn't see it coming. People are using the comment sections. Please, we do check them before every podcast, so thank you. We had a couple comments that I am not going to mention now because they require Pete's feedback, but we will get on it the next podcast we have with all three of us. So, and also you can hit us up on email, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. That is another good way to be heard. So,
you
PAX
can also
East.
just send smoke signals.
Don't do that.
You can also send a carrion pigeon.
No, you can't. A carrion pigeon? A pigeon that eats corpses? Carrion?
No, sorry. Carrier?
Carrier is different than carrion.
Yep. Both actually work.
No.
I'd love to get a letter from either of those.
I don't want your flesh pigeons. Damn it, Billy. I don't want your flesh pigeons. Please don't set fires to try and communicate with us. We don't communicate via fire. Though if you do, go to a bathroom, shut off the lights, look in the mirror, and then say deep listens, deep listens, deep listens, Billy does show up behind you.
Yep. I won't kill you, though. I'll just probably whisper sweet nothings into your ear.
That's fair. So, PAX East, you were there all 3 days. I was only there for Saturday and Sunday.
What a chump.
Yes, what a chump. But how was Friday? Did you see anything cool? What'd you do?
So Friday, for me, had the most panels that I wanted to go see. If you haven't been to PAX East or you don't know much about the convention, it's essentially a large games con with a variety of different experiences. Personally, I like going to the panels the most. That's one of my favorite parts of PAX because I get to speak, to some of the developers and some of the writers and some of the digital content creators for my favorite games or game shows. So for me, PAX is largely an opportunity to talk to people that I otherwise would never get to interact with. I mean, it's great to see all the games and new merchandise, but I get something really unique when I go to PAX, which is this sort of first-hand experience with people that make the things that I love. And so the general layout of PAX is like this three-layered donut type deal where the outside of the donut is just a triple stack of all these auditoriums and classrooms that you can go talk to panels. And the inside is like a 10 football field sized showroom floor.
A gooey showroom floor center to this donut.
It's just like a rich, creamy showroom floor center. And you can see tons of booths. I mean, there were hundreds of booths. There's also a huge LAN area, huge tabletop area, basically everything you want to see. So for Friday, for me, the lines were not that bad because it was freaking freezing outside. I mean, it was god-awful. It was snowing. So if you were a brave enough soul to go stand in line outside, you got in pretty quick, actually. It wasn't that miserable. You just had to brave the snow for about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So when
if you're willing to tolerate terrible weather, terrible weather, this was the PAX for you. Because there was terrible snow on Friday. There were extreme winds. It was very cold basically the whole time. But if you were able to brave all that, you got a pretty good show experience.
Definitely. So I went and I saw 3 panels that really stood out to me on Friday. The first one that I saw was pretty interesting, and I'll just give the general name of it and what my takeaway was. I'm not going to go repeat everything that I heard on the panel. But the first panel that I saw was about randomness and how random is used as a design element in tabletop games. And my biggest takeaway from that was that if you want to make random as an element in any kind of game, whether it's tabletop or video game for that matter, it needs to have intention. It can't just be there to make something different or interesting. For example, if you create a random element that just betrays a long and complex and investing decision tree of your player, you're kind of stabbing them in the back as a designer. So they came to this resolution, or they sort of explained this concept. If you're going to implement some kind of random element into a tabletop game or video game, it should happen at one of two places. Either at the beginning of a decision tree, so that players can use skill or experience to respond to what sort of hand they've been dealt, or it should be used at the end of a decision tree, and player skill should be able to mitigate the random. So you shouldn't have this long, 8 or 10 link decision tree, and then it all comes down to a coin flip. That's kind of betraying the decision tree. It's okay to do that, though, if it's like a D20 roll, and after you've made a certain amount of decisions, you might get modifiers like, you made 5 really good decisions but 1 bad decision, so you get +4 to your roll. You just have to beat 10. Now you've mitigated some of that random element. There's still a chance for failure, which is important, but you can mitigate that chance of failure with skill. One other thing about randomness is they said that there was a very specific middle ground you want with random. If you have only one instance of random, it kind of feels out of place. But if you have too many instances of random, it actually ends up making your game less interesting, because random lends to sort of a normal distribution. So the more times you include random, you just end up getting actually the same experience every game, because if you make enough coin flips or make enough D20 rolls, it's going to level out to against an average. There's a really important dynamic of including random in your games. The next panel that I saw was one that I think Gino had a friend at, and it was the panel that asked the question, does the author's intent matter in video games?
If we had Pete here, he would immediately emphatically say no.
Right, and that's where one of the reasons why I went to this panel was, decisions for the most part, and his opinions again for the most part, but this is an area where I wanted to kind of push back, and I was surprised and excited when I saw that the panel didn't just immediately jump on the author's intent doesn't matter bandwagon. Most of the panel is sort of resolved around that area, but they gave it a fighting shot. And my takeaway here was that I asked an important question, one that I would kind of been tossed around in my head, and I didn't really get the answer that I wanted, but I'll ask the question anyway. When a game is first released, from the moment of its release date onward, I think author's intent matters the least the closer you are to the game's release date after it's been released. Right? Author's intent matters, before anyone's played it, because they're deciding what the game's about.
Well, that's literally all there is at that point.
That's all there is. And then as soon as the community gets their hands on it, they have this way, way bigger impact on what the game's identity becomes. But I raised the point that the farther and farther you get away from a game's initial release date, the more author's intent kind of makes a second coming. They have a second wind of what author's intent's supposed to be there for. So if we are going to examine games as cultural artifacts like we do, then like we do in this podcast, for example, we should be taking into consideration that maybe this industry is going to be around for 100 years, and some of these really just influential and groundbreaking games that are coming out in our lifetime will be examined 100 years from now. And if that's the case, we're not really going to examine as much the cultural impact or the sort of status in society, because that has faded and that has changed. The things that are going to be most persistent are the design choices and some of the author's decision making, where they might have been in their development career. Kind of like how when we look at a piece of art or a piece of writing, we consider maybe where that artist or where that writer was in their life when we examine their work. That's less and less important, like I said, as soon as a game is released, but it probably gets more important the more a game ages and becomes an artifact as opposed to a new piece of media.
I can see that, but I think that with most artistic productions, when you look at them in that larger cultural context and you're starting to bring in an author's biography, that does not necessarily imply intent quite as much as greater context as where the author is. It doesn't necessarily matter. Like, if we found out that Melville was trying to write just a really cool whale novel when he wrote Moby Dick, and that was his intent, and if we asked him, like, well, what was this whole chapter about the squeeze of the hand? That seemed really homoerotic. And he was like, nah, that was just, I was trying to get the authenticity of the whaling experience. That's all that chapter was. This was really just supposed to be a real bitchin' whaling novel. That's what I just wanted, a real authentic whaling novel. It doesn't actually matter that that's what Melville intended, because Moby Dick, when read in context by other people, like, there is so much added mythology and interpretation into that book that it doesn't necessarily matter what Melville quote unquote wanted if you ask them, versus, you know, having that biographical experience. Like, for example, when Thoreau was writing Self-Reliance, he lived in the middle of the woods. Like, that's a big piece of context around that novel that it makes a ton more sense. All the anecdotes make a ton more sense when you know that he was in the middle of the woods, but it doesn't necessarily, like, if he told you, I'm writing this book for this reason, that does not necessarily give it extra weight. There was something with authorial intent in games that I think is really interesting, because I wasn't at the panel, I didn't get to ask a question. One thing that's weird with games is that they are so often never finished. And authorial intent gets to be exerted multiple times during a game's lifespan, which I think is really cool. Like, for example, in Mass Effect 3, people complained, like, very early on, there was a large public outcry about the ending of that game. And BioWare responded by releasing new endings. So the authorial intent, assuming that the authorial intent was to have these weighty, impactful endings that really were different and not, you know, some sort of samey sort of feeling to these endings. They were trying to end it with a bang, and they ended it with a whimper. You can actually go back in to a game and then say, nah, actually this is different. We didn't want this to happen. We're going to go ahead and download in new content so that it behaves the way we wanted it to, which is kind of unique to games right now. There aren't many other mediums where you can just have, you know, impromptu control. There are re-releases. There are times where, for example, like George Lucas can't seem to help himself every time they release a new Star Wars cut, but very few other forms of media allow authors to directly go in and manipulate the experience post-release in order to better match their vision or match feedback. But it sounds like it was a cool panel, and it had a lot in it.
Okay, so the next panel that I saw was a panel that discussed what we talk about when we talk about games having healing power. And it wasn't a very, I would say, like, informative or information-based panel. It was basically a handful of panelists that all had a similar story, or some kind of story that they wanted to tell, where there was a time where they were in some just dire situation, either with family or work or medically or whatever the case may be, and games played a meaningful role in them getting through that experience. So the panel was an hour long, and the panelists only shared their stories for like 30 minutes maybe, and the rest of the time was just an open mic where you could share your own stories. And a surprising amount of people got up on the mic and just started pouring their hearts out. I mean, to a room full of 100 people, and these are people that I could tell were perhaps not the kind of people who would normally get in front of an audience and spill their guts, but they did. And it was just this weird, like, I don't know, surreal, like, kind of visceral experience where everyone was just kind of sort of group hugging at once, but they were all in their chairs. And that was an interesting podcast, or an interesting panel, because it was very, very different from any other panel that I was going to. I mean, I basically take notes every panel on what the panelists are talking about, but, like, I didn't need to do that here. I was just in a room full of just massive amounts of positive energy, and it was all coming from games. So that was one of the most interesting panels. I guess, you know, not as informative, not really what I was going to PAX for, but I'm glad I went, and I would go to it again if it was offered next year. But after that, I was mainly just sort of walking around the showroom floor, I didn't really get to play any games on Friday because one of the things you kind of have to do at PAX is map out the area. So I had maybe like an hour or 30 minutes after all my panels were done for that day where I just wanted to go into the showroom floor and kind of like map things out and see where are things that I want to see tomorrow, like on Saturday. So I spent a lot of time on like the upper concourse, sort of looking over the looking over the sea of PAX and finding out what I wanted to do on Saturday.
And did you play any games on Friday, or was it just mostly panels and scoping?
I didn't get to play any games worth talking about. I got to play like in the free play game area. I got to just sort of walk around and see some board games, see some merchandise. I mean, I didn't get to play any games on Friday. Saturday and Sunday is where I played the games.
Very cool. So Saturday for me was driving up Saturday morning. I left at like 7, got there at like 10 something, had to then travel to the show, and then I was a dum-dum, and instead of just making the beeline straight for the convention center, I decided that I was going to be sneaky. I was going to stick to close to the river and then try and cross the river on a different bridge than the main bridge that kind of takes you to the show, to the actual convention. And so I tried to take some of the side roads, hoping that they would lead up to the convention. But if you've never seen the convention center in Boston, it is surrounded by big fences. Basically, everything you want to see is on the like all the entrances are on the second floor. The first floor is all like truck, loading docks, gigantic shipping containers and stuff like that. So I got to the foot of the fence thinking that, there's going to be an opening and then there'll be an entrance or something, or there'll be stairs or some way to get up to the first floor, but there isn't. I was just basically wandering around basically highways or exits from tunnels, trying to find ways in, and I just the whole time was like, if this was a game, there would be an entrance here. There'd be a secret entrance, and I'd get a treasure chest. But no, instead I got sadness and wasted like a half hour of my Saturday.
Of your life?
Of my life, of my finite existence on this earth, trying to find a way into the convention center. I ended up, those gigantic smokestacks like right across the street?
Yeah. I
was at the base of the smokestacks.
What?
Yes.
I didn't know they ever had a bottom. I thought they just went down forever into the earth.
They have a bottom, and it's a sad bottom. There's a door that I was like, this door seems to be cleared of snow on purpose. Maybe there's a way in. And it's like maintenance shaft 7. I was like, great. I don't think I'm allowed in maintenance shaft 7. Though if I was Solid Snake, this is clearly how I would be infiltrating PAX.
Definitely. Is
through maintenance shaft 7. But instead, I was just wandering around, and there were cars coming out of tunnels, and I was very scared. But it was fine.
So Sunday.
Then I actually got to the show floor on Saturday. Met up with some friends. Scoped out some of the different games and things that were going on the show floor. I didn't get to play anything quite yet. I think the first thing I really did was beeline to Paxomania, which you got to experience that also.
Well, we did some stuff. There was some cool stuff that happened on Saturday before that. Paxomania was at like 4 o'clock or 6
That's
o'clock.
True. I remember wandering the show floor, but I don't remember much else.
We went through the Indie Mega booth.
Yeah, we scoped it out. We scoped it out. You, I think, subscribed to
Loot Crate.
They did it.
One small thing that I do want to bring up here, and I won't say what I got yet, but I got something, some secret thing, some really cool thing that when we do the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run later this year, we're going to be raffling that sweet thing off. Or in some other way, making it available to viewers to give money to kids, and then in response, you get this sweet ass object.
Yes, it would be really hard to trace where it came from.
Yeah, real hard to trace.
So you signed up for Loot Crate, which I don't know why a subscription merch service would have quite as large a booth as it did, but people were waiting to sign up for it, I think, due to the exclusive things you got for signing up at PAX East. I played Brawlhalla while you were doing that. That game is fine. It is already out. It's like a Super Smash Brothers kind of thing. It has Super Smash Brothers rules in terms of getting knocked off the sides and stuff. Right. I didn't love it. It was fine. But it's already out and seems to already have its community. Then I think we kind of scoped out the show floor for a while, and then we went to Paxomania. And damn, what a shit show that thing is. What a beautiful shit show.
Yeah.
I got to see... So, there were a lot of storylines. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone if they want to watch the amazing the documentary footage of Paxomania 2017. I think Paxomania 3... But
it was Paxmania 3. Just the general idea of what Paxmania is a bunch of internet personalities that drum up like fictional shit amongst one another and then settle it in the ring.
Yes, the League of Heels. It's a fake video game it's a video game wrestling league. It is the realest, I guess. They play largely, I think, Royal Rumble for the N64?
Yeah, I think so.
And then... They had some other games going on this year.
They had a PS3 version.
I would say that the big thing this year was that someone tore... Johnny Cashinova, John Drake, known from Harmonix, tore his damn Achilles tendon.
Is that what actually happened?
Yeah, he tore his Achilles.
Ow.
In fake video game wrestling. He really tore it, and we were sitting right behind him.
Like, I saw it happen. Like, I saw him get injured, and I was like, is he just took a knee.
Oh, you saw him actually come down?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that. I saw him hopping.
Not bad.
Yeah, I saw him come down hopping and then hobble over to where we were sitting and his wife was sitting, and he was like, "I think I just broke my ankle." And I was like, "That sounds bad. Should I go get
medical assistance?"
Medical assistance? And he's like, "No, I think, after the show."
I'll just walk it off. It'll be fine.
I was just walking off, and he was not, his leg was fully extended, and he was in a bad way, and he could not put weight on it for the rest of the show, so they, put him up on stage and had him sit down the rest of the show, and then immediately after the show, he still couldn't put weight on it, and so people were, helping carry him over to where, medical assistance could come. It was bad. But yeah, he tore his Achilles jumping in celebration for a thing that we're not going to say because spoilers. But crazy. This is, I think, the third straight year that someone's gotten hurt in fake video game wrestling. Though this was, I think, the most accidental. This was purely a freak accident. Tearing your Achilles is a really serious... It's a very serious injury, but it's not something that just happens. You don't plan for it. That's a long-term wear and tear sort of thing.
Yeah.
But dang.
People in clothes made of money.
Yep, Johnny Cashinova and the bank. I gotta say though, to have one of the main storylines in the whole League of Heels thing be there's no health care for these wrestlers because Johnny Cashinova won't pay for health care, and then have him blow out his dang Achilles. If you were trying to script this, that would be how you did it, right?
Poetic justice. That's
how you would do it. But no, I think it's, sometimes reality is stranger than fiction.
Yeah. Later that night, after Paxmania, I went to a cool panel that was called Podcasting from Amateur to Procaster because, I just wanted to learn how to get better at podcasting. That I don't feel like that. I don't feel the need to really go into the details because, that'd be kind of explaining what a cooking show is on a cooking show.
Yeah. Okay, so you're going to talk about how to cook a turkey, but when you actually show the turkey, you've already cooked a turkey. So we didn't really get to play too many games on Saturday. Went to the Giant Bomb panel at the end of the day, but it was mostly scoping things out and all that stuff.
Something really cool happened after the podcasting panel that I went to, and it was honestly one of the highest points of PAX for me because I think I made one of the coolest connections. after the podcasting panel, I left and I was going to go to the Giant Bomb panel with Gino, but I kind of got out late and it probably had already started. But I was just kind of kicking around outside the podcasting panel, and one of the panelists came out, and I bumped into him. We just started like shooting the breeze for like 30 minutes one-on-one, and it was awesome. And this was one of the like panelists that was talking about how to be a podcaster, and we started talking about each other's shows, and eventually I was just asking him like tips one-on-one for a long time. But what was interesting was people were sort of like circled around us, and they were just listening to the things that we were talking about, like they wanted to hear as well. The panelist's name was Kevin Harrington, and he's got another podcast, a couple of shows, but we sort of exchanged contact info and wanted to just talk again later. So I talked to him via email, and I got some general pleasantries out of the way. But then he said, "Hey, you know what you should do is on Sunday, you should go see this one booth that has this one board game in it. Like I'm really interested in their game. I think it's really cool. I'm supporting them on their Kickstarter, and you should go check them out." So I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, I will." And I'll talk about that when we talk about Sunday. But just a really cool thing happened there where I made this really cool connection with another like very, very prolific podcast person, and I get to sort of pick their brain now on how to make this show better.
Cool. Oh, one thing we did see on Saturday was actually the mobile version of To the Moon, which was pretty cool. They have ported To the Moon to the iOS, and that's great. Any more people that get to play To the Moon, I think, is a plus, net plus. And like we were talking to one of the devs, and that game To the Moon was made with RPG Maker, which means that it does not have any real ability to port directly to iOS, which means the whole engine, basically everything except some of the sound assets and some of the graphical assets, had to be completely rebuilt in iOS, which is crazy. Like when people say that, you're porting a game, usually you think that it's a pretty easy process. You just, you put it in the port machine, and then out comes the new version. Oh, you're just making the game for a different thing.
The port machine.
I mean, the game's already made. You're just moving it over to another system. Whatever. You've already got it.
The port machine.
Yes. So it is implied, especially with how many games come out on multiple systems simultaneously, it seems as though that is a simple thing, but at least with To the Moon, because it was made on RPG Maker, there is no easy way to move it to anything other than PC. So it needed to be completely rebuilt from the ground up, basically, which is a big undertaking, and more power to them for getting it done, because that game is great. To the Moon is great. I have not played the iOS version, but if it's To the Moon, there you go. It's a great game. So Sunday. Yeah, Sunday was a lot more wandering for me. A lot more game playing.
Was a little bit more intentional for me because I had sort of a more specific plan for my Sunday. One thing that I'll talk about. Well, all right. Sunday had one particular panel that I wanted to see, and it was called "Cult and Suffering: Designing Evil in Video Games." It asked a lot of really important questions for when game makers or board game makers design something that makes the player do things that would be considered evil. There are some times where you are presented a game that gives you two choices and they're both evil. They're both bad. And what does that make the player feel like? What does that make the game theme? So there's sort of an interesting discussion on putting evil in games and sort of questioning as a developer, should I be making this? Or as a player, like, should I be playing this game? I'll give one brief example. I can't remember the name of the game, but there was a scene in it where there was a flashback where like a family had been killed or murdered in like a horror game, and the sort of like director or like the director guidance was, we're going to show like a scene where like there's like blood, and then there's going to be like crime scene, and then like killing kids. And
oh no.
And to make it sort of more lighthearted, like they use the model of killing kids sort of jovially or like humorously for the rest of the panel to sort of imply it as like that generic evil. But in that moment, some of the audience members kind of realized, some of the panelists realized, oh, hey, like if you make a programmer with like a family design a scene where like a family gets killed, that might kind of be uncomfortable for them. And if you're a gamer and you have to play through a scene that might be uncomfortable for you, that could just be kind of messed up. I'm not saying that there's no place for evil scenes in games, but it made me look at something that I hadn't examined closely before, which was what might the developers be thinking if they're not necessarily all gung-ho about writing a murder scene and programming it and designing it.
Yeah, makes you think about Silent Hill 4. Someone spent a lot of time making those undulating walls.
Someone spent effort designing the character model for an umbilical cord in a box.
They did. They spent a lot of time. And that was probably hard for them.
Yeah. The only other panel that I saw on Sunday was essentially like starting up a live stream 101. You know, how to get into streaming, some of the recommended equipment, some of the do's and don'ts, some of the mistakes people make on their first stream, or some of the tips. And they were sort of promoting this one streaming service. I think it's called Beam or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's supposed to be more interactive so that the streamer can design these little buttons that that viewers can sort of interact with by spending fake Monopoly money that they get just by watching the stream over a certain amount of time.
Oh, Salty Bucks?
No, not Salty Bucks.
Damn it!
Very similar to Salty Bucks, but you have to earn Salty Bucks.
That's true.
You have to use skill for Salty Bucks.
I think the Queen Alien from Aliens will mess up Naruto here. 5 Salty Bucks.
So that was sort of the end of my panel experience. I got to play a couple of cool games on Sunday. That was the day that I got to do a lot of my game playing, because on Saturday I had a mission to get merch, because the merch is usually all gone or running very low on Sunday. So I wanted to get merch on Saturday. I got to see a lot of the vendors on Saturday, but on Sunday I got to play 3 games that stood out to me.
Oh, So while you were at the Evil panel, I was at the No Clip panel.
Yeah.
Learning about video game documentary making from Danny O'Dwyer. That was cool. That was a very cool panel. Nice to see. He gave us all birthday hats. So that was my takeaway. I had a birthday hat. That was pretty good. I got to ask a question. The question was more like career development centered, but I also suggested that for one of his next documentaries, he should take a look at Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. He then told me to get off the microphone, which was a fair response. They did bring a suggestion box for future documentaries, and I wrote, "Why does Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood exist?" ? I assume that's going to be their next documentary.
I think that's a fair assumption.
Yeah,
how could you not cover that game?
It is the greatest mystery of our time.
Yeah.
So it was a very cool panel. They went over some of the difficulties of recording their interviews, some of the stuff that they have upcoming, some of just the difficulty of launching NoClip in the first place. But it was very cool. If you were into NoClip's work, it was a great panel to be at. So, now the games we actually played. What games did you play, Billy? Number one thing that jumps out at you. What is the number one game that you played at PAX East?
Zero Sum.
What is that?
It is a card game.
Like a collectible card game?
No. I think the right term for it, and this is credit to my friend John for correcting me, I think it's called a living card game as opposed to a trading card game.
Is that one of those... So is that like one where you buy a box and it's got all the cards in it, and then you eventually like buy expansions and...
Yeah, basically. I'll circle back to that because it ends up relating to my sort of highest point in PAX. So I played Zero Sum, and I want to talk about that for just a brief moment. But then I also got to mess around with Rhyme, and I don't really know what that game's about, but I got about 40 seconds of playtime, and it just felt really good and was visually pleasing, and all I really got was like some platforming experience, but it was it looks like a game that I am gonna keep my eye on, because I typically have an eye for games that I can just look at visually and see what sort of like the environmental themes are in a game, and I'd say, wow, I want to be in that world, I want to explore that world, and my completionist exploration part of me says, ooh, I want to go there, even if I don't know much about the story. I just know kind of I want to get my hands into that environment, get my hands into that world. We also saw the new Psychonauts game. We couldn't play it, but we saw it.
Yeah, and we did play Windjammers.
Oh, we played Windjammers. Yep.
We windjammed. That was pretty good.
And we saw Psychonauts.
I misguided you.
Which had
some
VR
Windjammers
components, which is cool.
Yes. Psychonauts: The Rhombus of Ruin.
Yep. I got to check out Yooka-Laylee, which is the spirit successor, so to say, of the Banjo-Kazooie series. I think Banjo-Kazooie was one of my favorite games from the 1998 golden era of N64. And it had a great sequel, and then it kind of took a hard left turn, and no one knows what happened to it. It's probably in a ditch somewhere, but tip your hat to Banjo-Kazooie, and some of the devs from that golden era got together and said, let's just make a really, really cool fan service project, and it's called Yooka-Laylee. And what I could see of the game was it's going to really be true to the early Banjo-Kazooie, like, Rare style, as far as its physical, as far as its game physics, and some of its overall aesthetic.
A lot of things have googly eyes.
Yeah, I didn't get my hands on a controller, but I saw that it had very similar platforming mechanics. The physics looked very similar. The overall text and aesthetic has that Banjo-Kazooie feel. The characters talk in this sort of... No, listeners, that was not your audio cutting out. That was us doing perfect, spot-on imitations of Banjo-Kazooie characters.
And if you know the Banjo-Kazooie characters and how they speak, you can translate what we just said.
Yeah, you do.
It wasn't great.
Oh, no, it was all lewd.
Yeah, Yooka-Laylee looks pretty cool from what we saw. I actually got my hands on a couple things. There was this game called Tower 57 that I got to play. It's a Kickstarter game. It was a pretty decent twin-stick shooter from what I played. I got to play as not Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
His name was like the president or something, or like it was a generic name, but was very clearly Abraham Lincoln. I got to throw eagles that exploded. That was pretty good.
Nice.
But I eventually got a black hole gun, and then it made the game crash. So,
great. Unclear.
That game seemed cool. It was a pretty decent twin-stick shooter, but then it crashed. So I don't really know. I don't have as much of an idea as I might otherwise have had. It had some interesting ideas going on with multiple weapon types and sub-weapons and upgradable sort of stuff. You seem to be accruing money. But I unfortunately was not able to spend it because the game crashed. Then I got to play, let's see, what other... I saw there was a new Sonic game.
Okay.
Sonic... This time we recaptured Sonic 1 for real. Please play it, I think was the subtitle. It looked like they remade Green Hill Zone. Like, actually, almost a shot-for-shot remake of Green Hill Zone, and then with a slightly different boss at the end, and they included some of the different, like, shield types from Sonic 3. So, like, there are shields, like the electric shield, that did not exist in Sonic 1, but now they're just kind of in Green Hill Zone. And then there was a second level you could play that looked like a city level with some new mechanics and new enemies and things like that. So it looked like an old Sonic game, which I guess is good. That's what people want, right?
Yeah. Wait, hang on. Let me just take my hopes down a notch. Wait. All right, good. My hopes are down. Great.
Yeah. Right.
So I want to circle back to... Oh, wait, do you have another one that you want to talk about?
Well, I have the game that definitely stood out the most to me. Do you want to save it?
We'll say that for after I tell another cool story, because I think that's a better finale. I saw two board games that stood out to me. One was this one that was called Zero Sum. The other one was a game called Dragoon. Dragoon is out now. Dragoon is a lot of fun. The general idea is that you and your dragon friends were just living peacefully on your dragon island until these asshole humans invaded, and it sort of just awakened your lust for destruction and gold. And so you play as a... I mean, you were just living your life peacefully until these assholes just moved in and started taking over your island, and you got to just lay the smackdown. It's from a developer called Lay Waste Games, and one of the cards is called Lay Waste. And when you play it, everything you touch is destroyed for the rest of your turn. It's pretty great.
That's pretty good.
One thing that stood out to me about this game was that it is in some way sort of like randomly generated. This, like, the board is, because it uses a coordinate system and you use dice rolls for the X and Y coordinates. So that's a really good way to use random in a game. In fact, one of the developers of this board game was in the randomness in games panel. A guy named Zach Given. This was his first board game that he designed, and I think this was an excellent use of random, because it's one that the players can very, very easily adapt to with skill and good decision making. So, certain tiles on the board are generated from a random dice roll that generates these XY coordinates, but the players can interact with what unfolds on the board, and it's hectic as a 4-player game, but really, really fun. The other board game that I saw, and this circles back to my meeting with Kevin Harrington, which is a game called Zero Sum, developed by Bad Captain, I believe is the name of the development company. And this game is what I'm most excited about. We are very likely going to be doing some kind of podcast coverage with these folks, so I won't go into massive details about the game, but the general idea is that you're going to play a deck. You can sort of like purchase a box that is a faction of a corporate storyline. So if you think sort of in terms of other card games that we're familiar with, like Magic the Gathering, think about like Ravnica or something, where they have these sort of like guilds in Ravnica, and sort of like apply that to these factions in Zero Sum. There's 7 of them, I think, in the making. I have to get some of these details right when we talk to that developer, but they had 2 ready to play. So I played with these factions, and you don't play head-to-head against an opponent. You play against a third deck of, like, scenario. So there's limited player-to-player interaction, but it is competitive. You're sort of trying to condition your deck, condition your scenario to deal with these circumstances that unfold by every turn flipping over a new, like, problem to deal with. And your team has to deal with that problem. One thing that I think Gina would like, because you like this kind of mechanic in Magic and other games, one thing that Gina loves to do in Magic is just like pay life for stuff.
I like paying resources that aren't mana.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, if I can pay something else.
If it's not mana and you can just pay a cost, just do it. Have to do 30 push-ups, do this. Great. Well, in this game, your life total and your economy is the same thing.
Ooh.
So if you have like a 5-card hand and all those cards cost 3, like you blow through 15 life and you're down at 5 now. If you wanted to. There are ways to generate more life/money, but it's kind of slow, so you like the pacing could be as fast or as slow as you want it, and you can take yourself to the brink of death if you want to get an early game advantage, but then if you get stuck, you're in a real bad spot. Creates a very, very cool game economy dynamic. It's something that I'm really looking forward to. And those developers talked to me. They heard that we had a show, and then all of a sudden Kevin Harrington walks by, and I was like, "Oh, hey guys, what's up?" We all just started shooting the shit and talking, the 3 of us again. And the end of that conversation ended with, "Hey, Billy, you should just take this unreleased demo version of this game and playtest it with your friends, and then tell us how it is."
Sweet. So we will be doing some playtesting.
Yeah. Well, I will be. I don't know how I can get cards in your hand.
We'll make it work.
Maybe
That'll be a GBCR thing for a hot second or something.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows?
That's pretty cool. I just found out that Tower 57 is being released for the Amiga on top of being an Xbox One and PS4 game.
Great.
That's pretty great. Okay, you won me back. That explains why I crashed.
Fantastic. So, the last thing about Zero Sum is they when they went to PAX, they had just kicked off their Kickstarter like 2 days before or something like that, and they're doing really good. So I'm excited. They have a lot of really cool stretch goals and stuff. So I am a backer, and I'm gonna keep my eye on that because that looks like a card game that's trying to do a lot of things different and trying to break a lot of rules, and I'm all for that.
I love card games that don't play by the rules.
Yeah, they have to fix some of their rules, and I've emailed the developer about it. But like,
that's fine.
It's okay. Hey,
it's all in flux.
Yeah, it's all in flux.
So the game for me that stood out the most. So I did play another game called Masquerada. It seemed like a combination, like the aesthetics was kind of Valkyria Chronicles, but it was a bit of a CRPG, like computer role-playing game. Think of Baldur's Gate or Dragon Age Origins, any of those games. It had that kind of moment-to-moment combat where you've got a bunch of abilities on cooldown, and then when you run up next to something, you'll start auto-attacking it, and you're generally managing your skills and your cooldowns. But then it has an anime storyline. Seemed pretty cool. I played a little bit of it. But the game that really jumped out at me was The American Dream. Did I tell you about The American Dream, Billy?
Oh, yes. I do know the game you're talking about. American Dream, yes.
So there were sign-ups for The American Dream, and I did not sign up because I did not know there were sign-ups. It is a VR game from the makers of Screen Sheet, and the game is set in an alternate universe America, I guess. I guess it's an alternate universe, unclear. But it starts... I actually got to play it by kind of waiting, and someone missed their appointment or was late for their appointment, so I got to play for like 5 minutes. It starts you in a hallway. Think like BioShock when you're getting the whole, man, are you not entitled to the sweat of your brow? No, says the man in Washington. No, says the Vatican. It was that kind of like big, declarative moment, and you're stuck on kind of like stuck on rails. You're in a little cart on rails, kind of going through like a horror house or something like that. But it tells you, what makes America great? Is it this beautiful land we live in? No, it's not that. Is it the sweat of your brow? No, it's not that. What makes America great is the ability to use tools to get whatever you want. And the tool of the future is the gun. And we will show you how guns will allow your children to get whatever they need from America, basically. And so the game... The first level the level I got to play, or the section I got to play, was called Baby's First Gun. And you're in a crib, and they give you 2 guns, and then they teach you how to. And this was with the Oculus Touch, so I had the guns in my hands basically. And then they show you how to reload by lowering the mobile on your crib, and there are casing, clips of ammo on the mobile, and you have to slap the bottom of your gun into the clip to load each of your guns. You have 1 gun in each hand, and then a mom, like a 1950s mom, shows up, and she's got a bowl of slop in one hand, and then she's like a cardboard cutout, and the other hand is just like a hand, and then the hand bends back, and when it comes back, it's got a gun in it. And she dips the gun into the bowl of gruel, and then she feeds you via the gun. And you have to lean into the barrel of the gun to eat off of it. And she feeds you a couple more times. And then they ask you important questions to show how children will be educated in the future. Like, what's 2 plus 2? And then there are 3 answers, and you have to shoot the correct answer. It's pretty great. And then in the second half of the game, I didn't get to play this part of the demo, but I saw people playing this part of the demo. You got to work in a bagel factory, and you had to shoot like rat-infested dough off of the conveyor belt, and then any good dough would come out the other side out of a bagel machine, and then you would have to shoot holes in the bagels. with your gun.
That's how you make bagels.
That's how you make bagels. And then you got money based on how well you did, and depending on how well you did, you were able to buy hamburgers and shakes and hot dogs. And at the end of the demo, it weighed how much money you made in terms of how many hamburgers you can afford. It was pretty great.
Welcome to America.
To be fair, some of this stuff was just like, I have not played a lot of VR, so I got a big kick out of like reaching out to the mobile and like slapping it around and shooting everything in the room. Also, when you reload in the regular game, after they teach you how to reload, there are buttons on each of your cart, on each of your armrests, and you slap it, the button with the butt of your gun, and then it launches a clip into the air, and you have to catch it with your gun. You have to catch it in the bottom of your gun, and that's how you reload.
John Woo VR.
Yes, this is John Woo's Stranglehold,
Correct.
but VR. It's pretty great, and there's a dog, there's a golden retriever who tells you what to do all the time. I think his name is like Buck Masterson or something.
Nice.
The art for this game is pretty incredible. Like, if you see any of the like promotional art, there's a like 1950s family at a barbecue, and the dad has a plate in one hand and then a pistol pointed at a steak, and then his son has just a pistol pointed at the steak. It's amazing. What a fun thing. What a fun thing. And what was your big game of show, or was it?
It was zero sum for me.
It was zero sum?
I'm probably the most interested in getting my hands on because, like I said, I think it takes the style of a TCG and breaks a lot of rules by saying, wait, we're just going to give you all the cards. You don't have to open boosters, but it's going to play and feel like that.
Very cool. Well, I think that's our PAX East experience. I bounced after that because I knew, nothing else would get quite that high.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
PAX overall was great. I think one thing that is a choice you have to make if anyone ever goes to a PAX, quick tips is if you're going to think about going to PAX, and I think anyone who will listen to this podcast probably should go to PAX at some point.
Or at least think about like going to a convention and meeting some new people, because definitely the more times I've gone and the more people I've gotten to meet and grown like my friend group, it has been more and more fun every year. Mm-hmm. I've gone to fewer and fewer panels, and I definitely haven't gone to like Magic the Gathering tournaments ever again at that thing, but I've spent more and more time with cool people, seeing cool things, and that's been the highlight of my show.
What you want to do is get your hands on the schedule ASAP and budget your time. It's going to sound weird. You kind of want to part of you is going to want to just go to PAX and just look around at everything and be starry-eyed, but I think you'll do more favors for yourself by understanding everything you want to see and planning a route. It sounds a little bit counterintuitive at first because you want to just get the Disney World experience, just walking around stargazing and just everything shiny and new, but try to have some intention in your days, and you'll get to see more actually by doing that.
Yeah, and there's also generally some of the high traffic, high frequency stuff. You're going to want to sign up. There will be signups, so you kind of have to make a beeline to them. Or for example, Psychonauts in the Rhombus of Ruin, there were online signups. You had to download a PlayStation app on your phone to sign up for the demo. So they're handling signups and wait and lines and things like that a little bit differently year to year. So try to find out how the heck you can play the games you want to play, because sometimes it means standing around a booth for a couple minutes. Sometimes it means signing up, making a beeline to a booth and immediately signing up for a demo 3 days in advance. And sometimes it means just kind of accepting that this line is way too long. I would say if you're waiting on a line at PAX for longer than 30 minutes or 40 minutes, you probably could have seen 3 indie games in that amount of time, and or different games, and gotten more out of the experience. Yeah. Now, of course, if there's one game you absolutely have to play, sometimes it's worth the wait. But generally, the demos are so short that it might not be worth it.
Like, I probably would have waited a good 30 to 40 minutes to play ukulele, because that game would hit on a lot of nostalgia for me.
And you love collecting things.
Yeah.
You love it a lot.
Yep-a-rooney. I don't have anything else for PAX. I think I'm good. I got a bunch of cool swag and merch. I was able to ship myself home a bonus soda.
That's excellent.
And now there's just a bonus soda on my desk, and it's going to be a figure piece. It's going to be more like a centerpiece to my to part of my room.
This is where my discussion. This is a discussion soda. People come in and they're like, "What's up with that?" And I'm like,
"Oh, well, let me tell you all about bonus soda."
I'm glad you ask. Bonus soda. People were not prepared for our love of bonus soda.
No, they weren't, and some people never even heard about it. But
we need to corner the market on that. We need to get the last of it. But until that time comes, this is Deep Listens. That was PAX East. Thank you for listening. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. Continue using our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Gino. Again, man, you're my PAX partner, and I look forward to doing this again next year.
Yes. Thank you, listeners. Till next time. Peace!